I'm Kathryn Kidder. Today is July 24th, 2020. I'm with Marceita Hoffmann. Marceita, would you please say and spell your full name, including your maiden name?
Yes, it's Marceita, M-A-R-C-E-I-T-A. Napier, N-A-P-I-E-R, Hoffmann, Hoffmann.
Thank you. We are so grateful that you're here to make this recording of your relationship with the Agricultural Women's Club associated with the University of Florida, a club that was founded in 1908 and disbanded in 2020. Also with us today is Gail Trotter, G-A-L-E-T-R-O-T-T-E-R. So Marceita, where were you born and when?
I was born August the 19th, 1932, in a small town in eastern Kentucky, Hazard, H-A-Z-A-R-D, in 1932. My parents were Marcus and Agnes Napier. Both of them were educators. So I grew up in a family where reading and politics and social issues were always discussed. They emphasized education, of course, but I had a very good, very safe childhood.
Who were your grandparents?
My grandparents?
Yes.
On both sides or just maternal?
Mm-hmm. Both sides.
Yeah, maternal was Grace and Talton Combs, C-O-M-B-S. They were both from Hazard, born and grew up there. My paternal grandparents were Callaway and Sarah Napier, again, born in the area of Hindman, Kentucky, and lived there all of their life.
So your parents also lived all their lives in Hazard?
The what, I'm sorry?
Did your parents also live their whole lives in Hazard?
No. At the beginning of the Second World War, my parents were both teachers. My father was a principal, my mother was a teacher. At that time in Kentucky, teachers were only paid the months that they taught. So the war was coming on and everything was rather depressed financially in eastern Kentucky. So we moved to Michigan and lived in Michigan most of the war years. My parents taught there also. After that, after the war, we moved to Miami, Florida, where my uncle had an electrical business, and the phenomenal growth in that part of Florida after the Second World War, they had a very good business. And my father left education and became an electrician.
What are some of your earliest childhood memories?
They were very good. I have happy memories. There was a large extended family on both sides of my parents. We were teasers and pinchers and jokers and hugs. Everybody hugged. We were treated, my sister and I, as very important people. So we were very well adjusted as far as socially. I came from a family of devout Methodist, so our church was very important in our social life. I just ran around barefooted most of the time in the summer, and we had a very great deal of freedom because our town was small, so we could run all over. Just the normal things, hopscotch and hide and seek, and all of the childhood things that we did. We thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very safe also.
So that gave you a lot of freedom in your childhood. What were your school years like?
What was my what?
What were your school years like?
Oh, very good. We were fortunate again to live in a small town where everybody knew the teachers and the teachers knew everybody. So as children, you were pretty well disciplined because you couldn't get away with anything. Everybody knew your mother and your grandmother. And if you misbehaved or were where you didn't belong, all they had to say to me was, "Does your mother know you're here?" And I would run home. So it was safe, and yet people gave us a lot of liberty as far as what we said and what we sang and what we did. And everybody in town, the old statement, "It takes a village to raise a child," that was true in our hometown. Everybody knew you, and you just felt safe and free.
Did you have a kindergarten in your school?
No. No, it went from first grade, and then there was the high school. So I went to elementary school to the 5th grade. And when we moved to Michigan, I was in the 6th grade. So, and my mother was teaching in the same school, so I had to really behave.
What did your mother teach?
She taught 1st and 2nd grade.
And what was the name of the town in Michigan?
Wayne, Michigan. And that was also a happy time too, because my youngest aunt on my mother's side came to live with us to work at one of the Army bases all around the Great Lakes. And she was so much fun and so pretty, and we just had the best time. My aunts taught my sister and me to dance and to sing, and we listened to the Saturday night hip parade, and we would dance and sing and just have a wonderful time.
Did you have favorite subjects in school?
Yes, we were, because of our parents, we were introduced to reading early, so we were voracious readers. So, and to this day, I still read a lot. At about 8 years old, they discovered that I could sing. So I began to sing in the children's choir in church. And that lasted all through college, the singing in a quartet. And actually, I'm very proud to say that the quartet I sang in college actually made 2 records, and 2 of them were actually sold. And that was to family. So it's singing, and I love to dance, read, and I love gardening.
What were your homes like?
My what?
Your home. What kind of home did you live in?
Most of the time, we didn't live in very big houses. We were typical middle class, and our homes were always full of kids. My mother used to complain and say, "Do they have any homes?" Because there was just so much going on at our house. And my grandmother would always bake things for us. And one of our best, delightful activities was my cousin Bobby would go and find a dead animal. And then we'd have a funeral, and I would sing, and my grandmother would make cupcakes and serve Kool-Aid. and Bobby would preach. And we became the preaching kids of the neighborhood. It ended up where the neighbors would call if they found a dead animal, particularly a snake, and we'd all troop down there, and the coffin was an old shoebox, and we carried on and preached and hooted and hollered, and we just had the best time.
So you got to high school. I guess you weren't having funerals anymore, but what was your high school like?
Well, I really enjoyed high school because, again, it was not a large high school, and I had gone to junior high in Wayne so that I knew a lot of the students. Living in Michigan was really an education for us because we were very sheltered children in a small town, and everybody had the same background, came from the same families, and there was a lot of intermarriage among the local families. In Michigan was their first experience with meeting and living and enjoying, having fun with all of these immigrants, and most of the kids had unusual names to us. So we learned all about all of the European countries. One of my best friends was a second generation Italian, and all of the kids came from a very recent immigration. So that was an education, and we really learned a lot as far as difference in people. And we had never in our small town ever seen a Catholic church or knew a Catholic person. And the first time my sister and I saw a nun, we had to run home and ask my mother who that was. So you can see we were very sheltered. We're not worldly wise at all, but we fastly became one. Became very accustomed to different languages, different backgrounds, different religions. And it prepared us very well for later on because my family moved around a lot. So it was easy for us to adjust to a new place and new people.
When you went to Miami, were you still in school?
When I what?
When you moved to Miami? In Miami, were you in school?
Yes, I was in the 10th grade. No, I beg your pardon, the 11th grade. And again, that was a different situation, strictly Southern. At that time, Miami was just a very nice, very safe, very quiet, small town, believe it or not. And the high school, there were only 3 high schools in all of Dade County, where Miami is. So the adjustment for us was the slowing down of everything. In Michigan, everything was high-powered and moved, and lots of people and traffic and planes and etc. In Miami, it was just a laid-back existence, and most of the people were local. The families went back hundreds of years, so it was an entirely different atmosphere. But again, a very good learning situation. And I graduated from Miami Edison High School, and then went to the University of Miami on a scholastic scholarship. When I was a senior in high school, I was elected to attend Girls State, and that was sponsored and paid for by the American Legion, and that was to teach us government. And we stayed in Tallahassee at Florida State University. attended the Senate meetings, had lunch with the governor's wife, and again, a very good learning experience. But from that, from going to Florida State for the summer, I fell in love with the campus and the people. And it was, Miami was stretched out and mostly had Quonset huts because they only became certified after the Second World War. So Miami at that time had a great deal of veterans. So again, it was, and I did not live close to the university, so I had to ride buses. And that took up a lot of my time. And I appealed to my parents, let me give up the scholarship and please let me go to Florida State. So my mother and dad got together and said, well, okay. So I transferred to Florida State, loved it, liked the professors, the students, and it was really what college life should be. You all lived in dorms. You all ate in the cafeterias. They had wonderful dances and activities and was still close-knit. So, of course, at that time is when I met my husband, who also went to Florida State.
So Florida State was co-ed by then?
Yes, but it had only been co-ed a few years. So that was a lot of fun because a lot of the classes at the junior and senior level had a lot of veterans, and they were just full of it. They wanted fun and games and hooting and hollering, and they gave the professors problems. And we would often just sit and laugh in class because they were out of a different mold, you know. They also did not suffer fools well. So there was a lot of goings on, and it was just delightful. It was all in good fun.
So were you in any kinds of activities in high school and in college?
Yes, in high school and junior high in Michigan, I was in the chorus. And in high school, I was on the debating team, which was an excellent experience because we got to travel all over the state and debate other high schools. I belonged to the dance club and what else? The Feather and Arrow, if I remember correctly, club, and that was the history club. And in college, I was not in the chorus, but I participated in the musicals that the students put on every year. And that's where my comment about records, we made 2 records. And the songs were original and very good. So we went around the quartet that I belonged to. We were sent as ambassadors to all of the high schools in North Florida to encourage them to come to college and to join the music department. So we got to travel all over. And of course, that was a lot of stories because we traveled in private cars. And when we got one of the veterans to drive, it was a lot of fun. Again, just, you know, typical college students. So I just had a really good foundation from my family, a really good background as far as religion, morals, and values. There was no question. That was just expected. Very respectful to everyone, including following the law. so forth. And we often laughed and said we never could talk back to any of the adults because that was not allowed. And now I look at my grandchildren and they talk back to everything and everyone. So it's a different world.
What was your college major?
Education, elementary education. And when I graduated from Florida State, I graduated with honors and went on to get a master's degree while in service classes while I was teaching, and it was in elementary education. And I got a job immediately in Miami and taught for 3 years at the third grade, which I really enjoyed. I liked that age group, and it was just a delight. I loved teaching and I loved children. But in today's world, I would not fit very well because when I started teaching, there was very little discipline or social, emotional problems among the children. And there was a respect for everything. And today I would find it very difficult to teach. I'm of the old school. That's what my kids tell me, and my grandchildren. Their school life, both my children, I have a daughter, Rebecca Ann, and I had a son who is now deceased. And they would fill me in on how I was really out of touch, that I just could not fit in their world. So there was a lot of discussion about the difference in their opinions and how they acted. And it's always lively in my house. Everything was discussed. Everything not often solved, but at least discussed. And our opinions as children and adults in our large extended family were considered important. Not that the adults did it, but they always said, you know, how do you feel about this? What would you do? And it made us back off and as adults think more than just, you know, doing it without remembering from the past. So I had a very good, very enlightening and very solid foundation.
And a happy one,
Yeah,
a joyous
happy.
one. But
Yes, and my grandmother and my mother were very important and essential people. My grandmother would entertain us in the winter. She would get sweet potatoes and put them in the fireplace in the coals in the winter. And when we'd come home from school, we'd run up to Granny's house. She'd pull out the sweet potatoes and split them and put cinnamon and butter. And then she would entertain us till my mother and father came home with stories of her childhood. And I learned then that on both sides of my family was a very storied and a very important history. My father's family built a settlement school in Heinemann that is renowned, the Heinemann Settlement School, and my mother's family was involved in politics. So I had a good cross vision of anything that went on. Now I do have my family, and I do like the occasion to brag about them, but they were very solid, very educated, but in worldly ways, not necessarily in degrees. So just the atmosphere, my childhood and young adulthood, very solid and very good.
And what brought you to Gainesville?
My husband's position with University of Florida. We moved back to Miami when he was one of the last men drafted when the draft was still in order. And he was transferred. We were planning to be married and got out of college and got a job in a hospital. His major was immunology. We had planned our wedding. Everything was planned, and he was notified to report to the Army in Miami. So he went and reported, but he said to them, I really like the Navy, and I'd like to apply for officers training. Well, they took him immediately. The catch was, by the time the papers got through the Navy, the Army had called him and he was gone. He was transferred to Washington State, and we were at the base there, and I taught for half a year at the on the Army base, and it was sergeant's kids. And believe you me, it was the easiest teaching job that I ever had, because there were no discipline problems, because the principal came and said to all the teachers, if you have any problems, you just come and tell me. And what he did was call the commanding officer, and the commanding officer would call the father in and say, you better get that kid straight. So we didn't have any problems. It was a wonderful job. But after Christmas, he was transferred to California. And so we moved outside San Francisco, and he was stationed at Fort Baker, which is a famous old Army base. And it wasn't fun, because he had to spend a lot of time at the base, and we lived off the base. California was a different world as far as the people. You seldom met anyone that was a native Californian, and they were wild and woolly even then. And it was kind of an education for me, because I had applied to teach. And they said, oh no, you have to go back to school and get 5 credits in California history. I was thinking about that when I got pregnant, so that ended that. And our son was born on an Army base in San Francisco, the Presidio. When Ed got out of the service, we came back to Miami because he had a job at the University of Miami, not teaching, but in the lab. And he finished his degree, got a PhD in immunology while I taught school. And so then we moved to Gainesville. And we were very happy here. Gainesville was a beautiful little town. It was safe, quiet. And Gainesville being a college town, there were many activities for the family and children that, was not afforded if you lived other places. And they grew up running around barefooted like I did in a very close neighborhood, got dirty a lot. I mention that because a lot of the kids today do not get dirty, and they ran all over and built forts and had Halloween parties, and we had in our neighborhood, we had 4th of July bicycle parade, all of those things. And our kids could run around, and we never worried about them then. But as we all know, Gainesville began to grow. But it was a good background and a good place to raise children. They both graduated from local high schools, Pugh Hall High School. Both went to college. Our son graduated with honors from the University of Florida, and he became a psychologist, moved to Chicago, but became ill and we needed for him to be back here close to his family. So his family moved back here. From Mark, I have 5 grandchildren, 3 adopted, and they're all still living. As I mentioned before, my son passed away. My daughter lived in Atlanta. She's an environmental scientist, and her specialty is she has an advanced degree in hazard waste materials. After 17 years, she went to Troy State University and was a cross-country runner, and they traveled all over the country. So that was a wonderful experience for her. She moved to Atlanta and worked for a environmental company, and then was lured to the United States government. And after 17 years in Atlanta, she decided she didn't like the traffic and the atmosphere, so she moved back to Gainesville, where she lives now. And she works for Alachua County in environmental department for the county. So right now, that's where my family is.
What year did you move to Gainesville?
I can't give you the year, the number year, but as of now, I've lived here 50 years. So when we moved here, Gainesville wasn't anything like it is today. It was a beautiful little town, southern in atmosphere, and everybody had this southern accent, and everything just moves so slow. And but as usual, it has changed. But it's been a wonderful place to live.
How did you learn about the Agricultural Women's Club?
Well, Ed's appointment was in IFAS, in the agriculture school and department. And the Agricultural Women's Club was very active and very well thought of and very well known. So I was invited by one of the wives to come to a tea for new members. And I was very impressed because I had belonged to a lot of clubs and been active in a lot of social clubs and politics. I always worked in politics. I was very impressed with these ladies because they were very down to earth. They were extremely friendly and open, feet flat on the ground, honest, sincere. And they just sort of wrapped their arms around all the new women. So I joined the club, and from then on, it was then and still is my favorite club because the women were all very talented, very accomplished, and the husbands were of a different breed too. They were very supportive of their wives, participated in everything they were asked to do, and these women were so talented and clever, and they just like I said, just put their arms around you and gave you information about Gainesville. It was just a wonderful thing because I've not been able to attend any women's club. At that time, the club was strictly for social meetings, and in fact, it's in our little handbook that the club was established for social interchange between the wives. Then as times changed and interest of the women changed, the club did too. Ag women always answered to fulfill a duty or a project that was deemed important for the community. There were lots of activities that the women did and did without being asked to. They just said, we need to do this, and everybody just jumped in and did it. They did a lot of things for the community. For instance, we would man the phones for the financial drive for PBS. We collected canned goods. We gave money to, I think it was an orphanage. That was in the early days of the club. But ag women were always involved in what was apropos to the times and what was socially important at the time. So it wasn't just a social gathering. It really had projects and interest. And as the social picture changed, as the society changed, the interest and the thrust for ag women changed with them, so that we were always involved in recent things and part of it, made a point of that. That's why in the later years, we switched our interest to scholarships. And again, the people in this club were generous to a fault. All of the money that went for the scholarships for graduate students in IFAS was donated by the members. It was not endowed by anyone or any organization until later years, of course. But that always impressed me. Whatever the president said, this is what we need financially or jobs or volunteering, all they had to do was just say, this is what we need, and everybody jumped in and did it. Everybody worked. It wasn't just a little clique. So it was, and I just loved the women. They were friendly and would tell you anything, share recipes. We did make a cookbook one time. We all worked in tandem with University Women's Club. So whatever they were involved in, we had members involved in University Women's Club. So it was just a lovely, lovely group of women. And I really miss it. I lament the fact that with passing times, ag women has gone by the wayside. And I'm very sorry for that. I miss the women because we all became friends. There's still a little group that gets together on occasion. But again, our membership was aging. The young wives, most of them work, so they don't have the time or, frankly, the interest in clubs. That's not part of society these days. So I do lament the fact that it's no longer in existence. But being the generous people that they were, they left money in an endowment fund to continue scholarships for students in IFAS. And all of us are very proud of that.
Your role in the club was a very active one. You were president at least once or more.
Twice, and vice president twice.
Okay.
But it was fun. It was not like I was president of University Women also and vice president. That entailed a lot of work because it was a large club. And it was just the history of the club was very active and involved. And because of the size of the club, when you were president, it entailed a lot of work. financially keeping up with everything. And it was just work. Ag Women was work, but it was delightful work. Though if you ask for help, you got help. And also there was no one just vying for the position in Ag Women. If you want to be president, okay. You don't want to be president, that's fine. In the women's club, there was always someone waiting in the wings. So it was just a different atmosphere. It was a good club. I enjoyed it, but Ag Women were just different.
What kinds of activities were you developing when you were in leadership? What kinds of activities did you have?
In the clubs?
In Ag Women. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's so many things that Ag Women got involved in that I can't remember them all. But I have two occasions that stay in my memory. One was the Valentine's dance that Ag Women had at the university with a full band, and it was just packed with people. And it was just wonderful because at that time people dressed up. Everybody was in gowns, and the men had coats and ties, and and had dinner served. And it was just a wonderful time. Everybody enjoyed it. The other one was I think it was 4 years ago, our Christmas party that we had in the Women's Club. And that turned into be a frolicking good time because the entertainment was one of the men who got up and led the whole group in the 12 days of Christmas. And each table was assigned one of the verses. It started off very quietly, and then one of the gentlemen jumped up and screamed, 12 golden soldiers. So from then on, every table then, everybody jumped up and just yelled out the thing. 10 golden rings. It was just went around the room, and it was just so much fun, and everybody just laughed. It was just good, clean fun. And the other thing, the parties and teas and dances and programs that Ag Women had were just elegant. And what I mean by that is these women were so clever. They would make programs, and even the name tags were just a work of art. And they were all different, and they just did it because they wanted to and because they were so talented. And I never will forget one of the parties that we had. One of the older members got up and said at the end of the meeting, I just want to thank all of you because she had been ill, and she was brought to the party, and she said, I miss all these beautiful people and miss all of these beautiful artworks, and I just want to thank you very much. And everybody just clapped. But she said it, and everybody meant it. The 100th year celebration for the foundation of an organization of Ag Women was one of the most eloquent, well-planned, just professional. And it was just outstanding. And at that time, the University Women's Club, besides giving out scholarship, appointed a Woman of the Year from the agriculture businesses in Florida. And 2 of the women were recognized at this meeting. And it was It was a time that I don't think we'll ever have again. That's my opinion, but the memory from from that club stays with me. Again, it was my favorite club and was just a delight.
Where was the 100th anniversary celebration held?
It was held at the president's home and was catered. The floral arrangements, the planning, the program was, you would walk in and think this is a professional company that's done this, but it was done basically by the women in ag, in the club, in ag women. Everything was done. Everybody was dressed. That was another thing. In looking at the scrapbooks, which the members were faithful in keeping. So if you wanted to look into what the club did, if you look at the yearly scrapbooks, they were very well done. And that was important to the club to write down and record what this little club did and why it was important to the students and IFAS. So if you looked at the pictures of that 100th celebration, you would think, this isn't just a club, this must have been done by professional people. And that was true of almost everything ag women did, had a professional finished touch to it.
Who were the members of the club? What were they, people from the community or all university people?
Originally, it was the wives of faculty. In later years, they began to include some staff in IFAS, not many, because most of the women worked. If they were a member of the staff, some of them did. And then in later years, it would be anyone that was, not anyone, I'll beg your pardon, that's not correct. It was anyone who had worked in IFAS, but the members on the whole were the wives of faculty members and visiting faculty members too. Anyone that came that had a connection to IFAS, the women were eligible to belong.
What influence do you think the club had on the university community or the Gainesville community?
Well, our reputation was excellent because whatever we did community-wise, we did it quickly. We carried through on whatever we said we would do, and people knew that if ag women were involved, it would get done. And everybody knew, or in clubs, now I'll say this, and the university was well aware of ag women because they were just everywhere doing almost everything that the university was involved in. There was a member or a past member that did do this, did belong to whatever organization that they liked or wanted to be in. So everybody knew the reputation of ag women was excellent. If you said you were an ag women, they knew that you were in a good club.
You said the husbands were also involved sometimes?
Oh, yes. And most of the time in evening occasions, sometimes in the summer or early fall, the husbands would be invited to a barbecue out in the forest. They always were invited to the Valentine parties and the dances. So they were involved, but they'd also help if they weren't involved. When we had bake sales at one time, the husbands would come and load the cars, and they were always there willing to help and very supportive of the women and whatever they were doing.
Did you feel any pressure to belong to this club, or did you, because of your husband's position when you came, or was it totally your idea?
Of the club or joining the club?
Yeah, did you feel like you had to be a member of the club because of your husband?
No, as a matter of fact, that's one of the changes, is the wives at that time did everything they could to advance their husband's career. We just thought that was what we were supposed to do. Whatever would help him, we did. But again, as society changed and times changed, the younger women are not interested in that. Most of them have their own careers. And as a matter of fact, we have very funny stories about some of the remarks the new women would make. And we always were given the names of new faculty members. So our membership chairman would get her little committee, and we'd all call the new wives. And when I first came, they'd say, "Oh, yes, yes, I'm interested." And we'd go and pick them up. And as time went on, if you talked to them, one of the ladies said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, it's basically a social. So you get to know the other wives of your husband's department. And plus we give scholarships." And she said, "Well, I have children and I have a career, so I'm not interested." So we thought, okay. Here, a lot of at that time, board members and ag women had children. So nobody ever said I can't join because I have children. Another one said that she was not interested in doing anything for her husband's career, that she had her own career, and when a club was organized to help women in careers, she would join. So sort of the attitude has changed. Many of them are really not connected to what their husbands do. So that's part of the change in our society today.
You mentioned the conflict between family and other activities. Was that a problem for you? You were very active.
No. By the time we moved here, both of my children were not infants and did not require, or did I want to stay home and take care of them. They were all in school. They were all involved. So it worked out very nicely. No, it was not a conflict with me at all.
You were very modest about your contributions to the Agricultural Women's Club, but I believe that you were the historian or the keeper of the scrapbooks and the records for the time that you were in it, right? Mm-hmm. So tell us what you did.
Well, I was always involved in whatever the projects were. The women made a point of keeping in touch. We had a social chairman, and she was responsible for getting in touch with the women or husbands, their family, anyone ill or in the hospital or any death or anything like that in the family, ag women responded. Most of the time, what the president did was just organize the occasions. She did not make the rules. A committee did if they changed any of the rules. So the whole club was involved in everything that was done. It was not done by the board or the president. It was a combined effort, whatever we did. And I was the historian. That was my first job. Then my second position was treasurer, if you can believe that. I laughed because when they asked me to do it, I said, you do not want me to be your treasurer because all you have to do is look at my checkbook. And they said, no. And one of the past women who was treasurer sat down with me and taught me about what you have to do as a treasurer. But that was these women. They were very giving and very responsive to any need that you had. If you asked for help, they were the first to give it. So in holding different positions, I learned a lot. And then I moved up to I was the program chairman and then the membership chairman, then vice president, and then president.
Very, very active. Marceita, I have a question that no one's brought up in our interviews. Do you remember that when we received our handbook in the fall, our membership directory, that your name had after it the name of a committee that you were going to serve on that year? So you knew in September that you would be on the Christmas party committee or the spring barbecue or the summer ice cream social or whatever it was. And you just were automatically assigned. I never heard of that before.
And that was agreeable to the membership. A lot of clubs, that would not be something that they wanted to do. But that was an effort to involve everyone. Everybody had a job to do at least once a year. And that they get together and decide who was the chairman, and then they would work from there. So that was an effort to involve everybody. And it was supposed to be a learning experience. What you do as treasurer, and we were required, if you had any type of position on the board, is you kept a journal and you handed that to the next new treasurer, so that the first page is, this is what your job is. This is explaining what you do. Then 2, 3, 4, so that right off the bat, the new treasurer already had an end to what she needed to do. And that also was a learning situation. It taught the women to be organized and to prepare. As one of the presidents said, pray for the work for the best, but pray for the best, but work for the worst, which meant be prepared for everything. But there was no big problems with the membership or the club. So it was just, that was a wonderful time in my life, period.
I have another question that was sent by a club member. And this is a little bit long, so give me a signal if you can't hear everything I'm saying, okay?
Mm-hmm.
She said, she asks you, do you remember some of the perks that club presidents enjoyed in the 1980s? If you were a club president of a women's group such as AAUW, the Engineering Wives Club, Gainesville Women's Club, Kiwanis Club, Pilot Club, Black Women Matter, Junior League, any club, including Agricultural Women's Club, the presidents were invited to attend a breakfast meeting every month at Moss Brothers, which was a fine department store in Gainesville. Every month, a breakfast meeting. We were asked to do surveys and to discuss any problems that we had encountered while shopping at Moss Brothers. The store manager was always there, and we might get a gift of makeup or see a short fashion show. And it was a wonderful opportunity to meet women who had no university connection, but who were active in the community. And an additional perk was that each of us received a 20% discount for everything we bought that day. And after breakfast, we all shopped for the rest of the day. Did you have that experience?
I remember that. And that was just a lot of fun. And you did meet people at that time. If you went out shopping or anywhere in Gainesville, you usually ran into somebody that you knew. And that's what happened when we did worked at Moss Brothers. And it was just fun. Plus, as president, I was invited to be a member of the President's Council for a year. And the other one was the Women's Organization for Women Leaders. And that was basic information for women that had any kind of position in telling power, which generally meant business, women in business. But the presidents of clubs were invited, and they had insight into what was going on in Gainesville, the city, and the county. So Ag Women had their finger in every little thing that went on, either by invitation or by wanting to be a part of the group. And I'm trying to think how often we did that at Moss Brothers. I think it was about 2 years that we did that. And of course, Moss Brothers and the other department stores were very eager to have clubs do fashion shows, which we did. And but again, changing times, it was very difficult to get, I'd say in the last 8 years, to get a department store to have a fashion show.
What did that involve, to have a fashion show?
The what?
What was involved in having a fashion show?
The president or the program chairman would contact the assistant manager or the manager at the stores. And generally, you knew this person, not personally, but you knew of them, and they knew who you were when you said Ag Women. Say, oh, yes. Then you made arrangements to get the women who volunteered to be models. And they would meet then with the floor manager of dresses or hats or whatever you were modeling. And you would pick out a dress, and they would furnish the dress so that you modeled their dresses and their products, not your own. And generally, the models ended up buying the clothes they wore. So it worked very well for both parties.
Were there any activities of the club that involved the whole family?
Yes, when we first moved here, Ag Women's membership was over 300 members. And every fall, they had a gigantic picnic out at Lake Noonan's Lake. And it was just sort of a madhouse because all the family would brought kids and everything. And it was fun. But you had to be in a little group where you knew somebody or you didn't know a lot of people because it was so big. And I do not know why they stopped doing that, but they did. That was the whole IFAS. And Ag Women had part in it in that they would work. If they had food to serve, Ag Women would serve the food and that kind of thing. But it was huge. But slowly, that lost favor. The ideas of fun and what you do with your family have changed, in some instances drastically. But everything that Ag Women did and that time in our history, America's history, that has all changed so quickly that the idea of recording this for future generations, I hope that if they read it and look at it, that they envy the time that we had, because it was part of your life, that's all. And the friends that you made are still your friends. So I do think it's important to record that because it represents a period in this country, not just Gainesville and not just Ag Women, but the social picture, political picture, the expectations of people, all of that has changed. So I think most of us look back on those memories with pleasure.
Well, you've done a great job of describing those things, Marceita. If you were talking to the women who founded the club in 1908, can you reflect on how they might look at the history of the club over this more than 100 years?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. That was why the 100th year celebration, that's almost unheard of, by the way, that a club on a campus involving women would be that old and still viable. So that was a very unusual thing. To have a woman's club connected with a university, particularly a state university, that lasted that long. But we did go down fighting.
And what does that mean to you? What was the end like for you?
Well, we hung on really as long as we could. Part of the problem was that our membership was aging. Many of them did not feel comfortable coming out at night for night things. A lot of them were ill, and there were very few young women who were interested in this kind of activity. It just was a change in what you wanted to do with your extra time. That was not important to them. It's just changing times. But like I said, I lament the fact I miss the women. I miss just the nice little hats and white gloves and teas and just nice things. Just lovely things. Always elegant, always beautifully prepared, was just lovely.
Well, I thank you for those fine memories. But before we end, going to a totally different subject, and you still have a chance to come back if you remember anything else, but a totally different subject. 2020 is the year of the pandemic. How is that affecting your life?
Well, actually, personally, it has not affected me that much, mainly because of my age. I'll be 88 in 3 weeks. And I've lived through a lot of not worldly pandemics, but flu. I lived through the curse of polio, whooping cough, measles. As a child, that was just beginning to come. The medical field was advancing towards the vaccination and really studying and know what caused it. And it was just sort of accepted a part of your childhood. In my age group, just about everybody had had measles, and the other horrible disease was diphtheria. Those are all past now. And so there's generations that have never had to deal with widespread disease. So at first I didn't take it too seriously, but the doctors that I've seen in the past 6 months have said that it is the first in their medical career of pandemic. And the frightening thing is nobody has figured out what causes it. So that's very frightening. Young people seem to look at it as a joke, but I think they're finding out it's not. Personally, I'm supposed to be restricted to my house because of the physical problems that I have. So I pretty much follow what the scientists say, but then I enjoy being alone. I'm always busy doing something. So being alone and in close quarters doesn't really affect me that much. So it's not affected me in a harsh way. It has, like my grandchildren, they're very frightened, and they should be. But personally, it has not affected me that much. Politically and worldly, it's very frightening because this is not going to just go away. Like all the viruses, the doctors tell you. Like polio, most people are vaccinated against it, but it's still out there. So the same thing with measles. They had an outbreak of measles when the Cubans came into Dade County. They had a pandemic of that in that part of Florida because they had never been vaccinated against measles. So it's still out there. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's very frightening because it has changed the economic outlook of our country. And it's very troubling what is happening to the middle class in this country. And the pandemic has affected them in drastic ways. So I feel fortunate that I'm as old as I am, that I don't have children that I would worry about. And as an ex-teacher, I would be torn between going back to school or sending my children to school. And I think the most harrowing thing is that nobody knows what to do. You're just, do I send my children? Do I go and be tested? Do I go to the grocery store? Whatever. So it's the first thing that, this kind of illness in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like it. And I've lived all over the states. Every section of the United States I've lived in, I've never seen anything like this. For instance, the only time I remember empty shelves in a grocery store was during the Second World War. But the reaction that the younger generation has to all of this is totally different than how we reacted during the Second World War. We were united in this effort. So everybody was on the same page. Even in my own family, there's one of my grandsons that is, "Oh, it's a joke." I said, "Well, you better hope that you don't get it, because I won't be to see you in the hospital, because I don't want to get it either."
Well, thank you for those thoughts and for everything that you've had to say and share with us today. Does anything else come to your mind before we close this interview?
Not that I can think of. The club will live on in the fact that for many years, and the Florida Foundation, coupled with the money that had been given for scholarships, that scholarship from agricultural women will go on for many, many years. So it's not completely dead. Again, it's a fond farewell.
Thank you, Marceita. I will now end the interview.